Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Today's video is going to be something a lot different than what I usually post here on my channel. Today I'm not going to be doing a camera review or talking about anything which is directly photography related, though there is some relation to photography in this story. Today I'm going to be doing exactly what it says in the title of the video. I'm going to be talking about the case of Johnny Somali, the American kick streamer who was arrested in Japan recently, and I use his story as an example on how not to behave if you decide to come to Japan. Before I get started, you're probably looking at your screen and wondering what it is that you are seeing. You're looking at the view from my living room window. I just set up my camera on a tripod and pointed it out the window to give you something to watch while I'm speaking here. And what you are looking at is the Roppongi district of Tokyo, and that tall building in the middle left or center left of the picture is the Mori Tower, which overlooks the Roppongi Hills shopping, retail, and business center. Way off to the left in the distance would be Shinagawa, and way off to the far right in the distance would be Futago Tamagawa. You're looking at a city of 14 million people. That's the number of people here within Tokyo proper, and closer to 40 million people when you take into account the general Tokyo or Kanto region. There are a lot of people who live here, but despite the fact that there are so many people here, it's a remarkably well-run and harmonious place. When you drive around Tokyo, you find that the roads are smooth and well-maintained. They aren't full of potholes or steel plates or stuff like that. The sidewalks are clean. They aren't full of cracks, and there isn't trash here and about. There's very little graffiti. There's almost no crime at all. You can walk pretty much anywhere here in the city safely. Very few homeless. Tokyo has about 700 hardcore homeless, which in a city of 14 million is not that bad, especially when you think at a city like Sacramento with 500,000 people has more than 8,000 homeless. Tokyo is quite an interesting place. It's an incredibly well-run city, and everything here works, and it works properly. Japan is also, overall a bigger version of Tokyo. It's a densely populated country, but it's well-run and a peaceful place with little crime, and people get along. There's beautiful natural and urban scenery here in the countryside. You can enjoy, the beautiful tall mountains and big lakes and rivers and waterfalls, or there are tropical islands and sandy beaches and lots of that stuff. And of course, here we have, what you're looking at right now, the city of Tokyo, which has lots of things to see and do. The secret to why Japan is such a great place and such a great place to live lies with the Japanese people, who are very conscientious, hardworking, honest, and get along well. I like to read literature, and one of my favorite series of books from the old days was The Three Musketeers. I think it was in the book The Man in the Iron Mask, where Aramis quotes these words, which I think he said, "What God does well." And I always have to apply that to the Japanese people, because what they do well. In this single city here in Japan, there are more Michelin star restaurants than the entire 50 United States combined. Japanese people love food, and they cook very well. When it comes to designing cars or motorcycles or machines or things like that, they do a fantastic job. The things they do as well as they can. With all the talent and all the skill and all the labor they can put into something in order to create something better. Japan is a country which is economical and based upon values, and the value isn't only monetary. They see value in art and value in laboring to do a good job when even doing minor things. And though this sounds like I'm getting a little distracted from my original topic, in reality it's related, because I enjoy Japan, and I like the people, and I like all the good they do and the kind of country that they've made, and that's what makes this story about Johnny Somali much more difficult for me to swallow, because during his visits here he was quite disrespectful, of the people and its country, and they didn't deserve that. So from this point on, I'm going to stay a little bit more on topic. What I'm going to do first is talk about Johnny Somali, who he is and what he did. And after that, I'm going to talk about Japan's criminal justice system, which is something which isn't very well known to people outside Japan, and which is something which they should be very much aware of if they decide to come here for any reason. So Johnny Somali is a young American man in his 20s. He came here to Japan on 2 different occasions with his cameraman. And what he likes to do is he likes to live stream confrontations with people, trying to generate, I guess, viral content and to drive, of course, traffic to his channel. He's what people loosely describe as a creator, creating some kind of content. And unfortunately, the kind of content he specializes in is this kind which has become more recent in popular years, where people are trying to provoke outrage or conflict or strong reactions in order to drive traffic to their channels. And as this has been, quite widely done in America, Johnny Somali thought in order to drive more interest to his channel, he would come here to Japan and try to do the same thing. And he made quite a name for himself in the short time that he was here. During his first visit, he was accosting Japanese people in various locations and bringing up the topics of the attacks on Pearl Harbor and the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also about the nuclear disaster in Fukushima, knowing that these are really provocative and subjects which Japanese people are not comfortable with. And to do the Japanese people credit, for the most part, they didn't react, or they didn't take the bait. And he didn't get a lot of interesting content from them. But he was able to get a rise out of other people, including a foreigner whom he accosted in Western Japan, who ended up knocking him out in the street. What he didn't know while he was here was that the outrage which he had caused with these live streams had been reported to the police, and the police began keeping track of his live streams as he was uploading them. And Johnny Somali, being ignorant of Japanese law and the way things are done here, unknowingly broke a number of laws during his time, and the police were just waiting for an excuse to get him. But wisely or luckily, his trip to Japan ended and he returned home. And if he'd have stayed home, things would have gone much better for him. But he decided to return to Japan to try to get some more content. And he was staying in Osaka. And him and his cameraman trespassed upon a construction site in the area and accosted the construction workers inside and their foreman, leading to kind of a harsh verbal exchange. Unfortunately for Johnny Somali, the police were watching this live stream, and trespassing on a construction site in Japan is a punishable offense, though it's not commonly punished. But it is punishable by up to 3 years in prison. So later on that night, when Johnny Somali left his hotel, the police were waiting for him. They followed him around for a little while, and he kind of live streamed himself being followed by the police, after which he was arrested and taken into custody. And this was, I think it was September 17th or 18th. And later on, his cameraman was also arrested. The last thing they said when they were arrested and being taken away was that they weren't going to say anything until their lawyer arrived. It's been now more than a month since they were arrested, and they remain in jail. And their last statement shows how ignorant they are of the Japanese system and how well they misunderstood it. So a lot of people don't understand the way things work in Japan. Japan is a very modern Western country, and a lot of people mistake it for operating under the same principles as other Western countries, and that is not the case, for better or worse. There are some wonderful things here in Japan about living here, and there's some things which are not so wonderful, and one of them is the criminal justice system. Japan operates under a constitution which was written by the American military occupation forces after the war. And being military people, they kind of had a military ideal when they created Japan's constitution. On the one hand, they followed the American principle of strong individual rights and freedoms for the people, with the exception of the right to keep and bear arms. On the other hand, they gave Japan more of a military-style system of criminal justice. And this is the one part which people have learned to their grief when they've done something wrong on their visits to Japan. In recent years in America, there's been kind of a change in society and an increase in lawlessness. People may argue one way or the other, but even in Japan here, we're kind of aware that America is a more lawless place than it was in recent years. And also there seems to be a decreasing lack of respect for the police in America. And, America's problems are America's problems. And as far as Japan is concerned, as long as these problems stay in America, then Japan is quite fine with that. But a lot of people, when they come from America to Japan or other countries which are, maybe not having the same changes as America or to the same extent, they bring their ideas and attitudes about crime or the police to Japan. And this is a very serious mistake. The way the police and the system of law and order work here are much different than America and the West. When you see your typical American police officer working in one of the major cities, they're kind of intimidating guys or girls, whatever the case may be. They tend to be rather big and bulky, and they wear body armor, and they carry large caliber semi-automatic handguns with extra magazines, lots of other equipment on them, sometimes tasers in addition to sidearms, billy clubs, the radio equipment and everything. And they're pretty impressive looking. They're like a stormtrooper without all the white armor on them. Whereas when you come to Japan, the police officers here look like minions. About half of them wear glasses. They all wear these light blue shirts. They are not physically intimidating. They don't wear body armor. They carry these small 38 caliber guns, which have been used in Japan for the last 60 or 70 years, and which most police officers in Japan couldn't hit the side of a large building if they shot at it. Japanese police are absolutely not intimidating, very different. But you can't let the appearances deceive you. The Japanese police have far more power than other Western police officers. I like to think of the Japanese police as like minions. When in their normal state, they are just quiet and helpful, and they give old people directions to the bank or to the various buildings, and they take reports when people lose their wallets and bags like that, and they don't have much else to do. But when you happen to commit a crime or do something to offend the Japanese police, it's like putting that kind of chemical that you put on minions, which turns them into these vicious purple monsters with big teeth. And that's what happens to the Japanese police if you rub them the wrong way. If you force them to exercise their power on you, you're going to come away the worse for it. Now, one of the first things I'm going to discuss next, what the Japanese police can do and what they can't do. And I have to emphasize that there's a lot that they can do and there's very little that they can't do. The first thing you have to realize when you come to Japan is that the police do not need probable cause to stop you, to detain you, to search you, or search your person. They can stop you for any reason or no reason whenever they want, and they can search your belongings or whatever. That's the normal thing here. And any non-Japanese person who has lived in Japan for any length of time has, of course, been questioned by the police. And for the most part, they're very innocuous. The first thing they ask you is, are you on your way to work? That way, if you are, they can handle the situation quickly and send you on your way. They want to know if you live here, where you work, and what your job is, and this kind of stuff. If you're a visitor, they, of course, immediately want to see your passport or ID. So make sure always to carry it here, because if you leave your hotel without your passport, you're probably going to be sitting in a police box somewhere until someone at the hotel can retrieve your passport and bring it down to the police box to show them. So, yes, the police can stop you for any time, for any reason, or for no reason at all. Second, you don't want to be arrested by the Japanese police. And there are some very big differences between the system here and other systems. First, in Japan, there is no presumption of innocence, at least not the way that we understand it in other countries. In Japan, when you're arrested, you're pretty much considered guilty until they either can't prove you are guilty, or until you prove you're innocent, or until the court decides you're innocent. When you're arrested by the police here, you can't bail out. And pretty much any offense which is serious enough to merit arrest is enough to hold you in custody until either the police decide not to charge you, or until you are acquitted of the charges, or until you confess and either pay the fine or serve whatever penalty the court assigns to you. If you're arrested, it's you're going to spend a little bit of time with the police, and maybe a lot of the time, which Johnny Somali and his friend have figured out the hard way. When you are arrested by the Japanese police, you do not get a phone call. You simply disappear. You vanish until your lawyer, or a lawyer who is assigned to you, calls your family or calls your employer and lets them know that you've been arrested. You aren't allowed to talk on the phone. You can't tell anyone what happened or where you are. When you are arrested in Japan, you do not have the right to have an attorney present with you during questioning. You have the right to consult with an attorney, to request an attorney, but that attorney cannot and will not be with you when the police are talking to you. In Japan, you can be held indefinitely without being charged. The typical standard is 23 days. They have to hold you until they formally charge you, but this can be extended, and sometimes it can be extended several times depending on the circumstances and the offense. So a lot of you maybe remember Carlos Ghosn, the chairman and CEO of the Nissan group, who was arrested a couple of years back in 2018, I believe it was. He had been arrested, and I think it was about 8 months before he finally had his first charge formally applied against him. And then he was given a court date for the following year in the springtime, which meant that he would have served almost 18 months in jail before getting his first day in court. And then there were rumors that his court case was going to be delayed into the summer of the following year. And when that rumor started blowing around, he I guess, didn't trust the system anymore, and being able to do it, he escaped. And the sad fact was that if Carlos Ghosn had been found eventually innocent on all the charges levied against him, that process might have taken several years, and it's possibly could have died of old age, even if he had been found innocent on all charges. So that's one of the dark things to remember. In Japan, when they have charges against you, they generally don't apply them concurrently, they apply them consecutively. So they will they will arrest you for an offense and try to get you to confess to that offense. And if that one doesn't stick, and they don't have the evidence to stick you with it, when the 23-day clock runs out, they will apply a second charge, rearrest you again, and restart the clock and start over again. And Johnny Somali had this happen to him just a few days ago. He was rearrested for a second offense, which was live streaming inside of a restaurant without the consent of the ownership of the restaurant. And so that resets his clock for another 23 days. So that means at least 45 days he will be in jail. And he's probably looking at longer than that. And that's before they even get around to giving him a day in court. It sounds pretty scary, and it certainly is. And a lot of people say that it's incredibly unfair, and that it should be changed. And over the years there have been attempts to change this, but these attempts have never gone through, and mainly for the reason, the simple reason that the system works. The system is incredibly unfair. It's incredibly scary, and it draws the ire of other countries around the world. But Japan sticks with it because the absolute dread of dealing with the Japanese criminal justice system it deters a lot of people from committing crimes. The fact that they have to go through the arrest without being able to contact family, friends, or a lawyer, or that they can be held indefinitely before they even get a day in court, or that they can be questioned by the Japanese police for 16 or 17 hours per day, every day. It's a serious consequence hanging over the head of people who might think about breaking the law, which is one of the reasons why so few people in Japan actually break the law. For most tourists who come here, they will never have to deal with this system. 99.9% of people who come to Japan have an incredible time. They have a lot of fun, and they come home with wonderful stories about their stay in Japan. But for that 0.1% who do run afoul of the police, they have a wonderful time, a less wonderful time, and they have much worse stories to share with their friends and family. So in the last part of the video here, I'm going to give you some advice on how to behave here and the consequences for misbehaving, and common things which could get you in trouble in Japan, and to be careful that you don't commit any of these common offenses or things which are not so serious in America. When people come here to Tokyo, especially to Roppongi, they love to drink. And there are lots of drinking establishments here. Every place sells alcohol. You're allowed to drink alcohol in public, walking down the sidewalks or in the parks or whatever. That's fine. Alcohol is quite culturally acceptable here. You can get away with things when you're drunk. You can throw up on the sidewalk. You can pass out on the street. All this kind of stuff, that's fine. That's completely normal here. It's completely acceptable, and it's good for a few laughs and whatever. And as long as you have a good time, and it's a good time, they're not going to give you too much trouble for drinking. But if you're one of those people who becomes angry and violent when you drink, be careful, because if you become angry and violent and cause trouble here or commit angry or violent acts, the police will put you through the criminal justice system. If you strike anyone, assault anyone or cause any property damage, you're going to be looking at this like a minimum of 23 days in custody before they deport you with the clothes on your back. So if you're a mean or angry drunk, don't drink too much when you're here in Japan. In America particularly, and in other countries, there's been kind of a relaxation of laws against casual or recreational drug use. That doesn't fly in Japan. The laws against drugs here are medieval. They're incredibly harsh, and all the bad stuff I've said about the criminal justice system here, if drugs are involved, you have to turn the volume up to 11. A drug arrest in Japan is like a life-ending event. It's in the field of view of my camera. You probably can't see it because there's lots and lots of buildings, but there's an apartment building I'm looking at right now, which was the residence of a famous retired Japanese baseball player whose name was Kiyohara. And a few years ago, he was arrested for possessing a small amount of drug residue. Something like 0.1 grams was found somewhere in his home. And despite the fact that it was a really tiny amount, he was arrested by the police and charged with a drug offense. And because this was a drug offense, it caused a huge amount of legal repercussions and a lot of trouble to his life. His sponsors immediately dropped him and stopped making any more payments to him. His apartment building canceled his lease and evicted him and forced him to leave. He had 2 kids enrolled in a private school here. His kids were expelled from the school and not permitted to return. In the end, his wife ended up divorcing him and taking the kids and moving to America to get away from the negative publicity. And this was, of course, a huge embarrassment to his other relatives and family and friends here in Japan. Drugs are a deadly offense here, and you don't want anything to do with them. If you come here, don't go ahead and drink as much alcohol as you want, but don't go around trying to buy drugs. And in the 1 in 1,000 chance you can actually find drugs, if you get caught with them, you're really going to be in serious trouble. So don't avoid them. Or don't do them. Avoid, And if you happen to come here to Japan to live or work, don't have people send drugs to you. For non-Japanese who live in Japan, pretty much every letter and every package which is sent to them will be checked by inbound customs. And anything which is illicit inside these will be found. And not only will you pay a steep penalty for this, those people who sent it to you in whatever country you're from are going to be in trouble as well. So if Japan is a great place to be clean and to stay clean, and if you come here, keep that in mind. For common things you can do, which you should be careful of, a lot of people when they come to Japan, they like to rent cars or rent a bicycle or some other kind of vehicle. Please keep in mind here that the rules of the road are very strict and strictly enforced. Japan does not believe in the concept of accidents. Any collision between a vehicle and a pedestrian or another vehicle is considered an act of negligence, and any collision which results in the injury of another person is considered criminal negligence, and anything which is criminal in Japan will, of course, send you to the criminal justice system and the Purple Minion Police. So be very careful when you are riding a bicycle or riding a rental scooter or driving a car. When it comes to driving cars, you must be especially careful. In Japan, if you get into an accident which causes a fatality, whoever was operating the vehicle or whichever vehicle was responsible for the accident, the driver will go to jail 100% of the time. You will be picked up on the scene of the accident, you will go to the police department, and you will not be free again until you serve your prison sentence. And the circumstances do not matter. So say if you're a tourist here and you're driving across Japan going through Iga on your way to see the big shrine Ise, and you're passing through a town where there's a big convention of retired ninjas and they're all getting drunk in one of the small bars in Iga, and the bar closes and they all leave in the middle of the night and they're dressed in their black ninja outfits, and one of them runs out between two cars and stumbles in front of your car and you run him over and he dies. You are going to be the one who goes to jail, and probably for a considerable amount of time. 2 or 3 years ago, there was an incident involving an American serviceman here in Japan. During the night, he'd gone climbing Mount Fuji to watch the sunset on the top of the mountain. And the next day, he was driving back to the base, and he fell asleep driving and got into an accident in which 2 people were killed. He was arrested on the spot, and he remains in jail today, serving a 7-year sentence. And Japan doesn't believe in things like early release for good behavior or stuff like that. So he'll be behind bars for 7 years and eventually released and then sent back to the Navy. I believe he was a naval officer. And he was kind of lucky because since he was an American and an officer, he got a lenient sentence. Normally, he would have been facing about 15 years in prison for killing 2 people in a car accident. So keep that in mind when you're renting a car or operating any other kind of vehicle here. The risk is very high if you get into an accident, so you should be very safe. If you drive in Japan, you'll notice people drive very slowly and very carefully. When I was a kid in California, we could always spot Asian drivers by how slowly and how carefully, though not very well, they drive. Here they drive better, but they're very slow and careful because the consequences of being dangerous are extremely bad. So, but all that said, I know this is sounding like mostly a negative video, but it's, as I said, most people never face any negative experiences or consequences here in Japan, so long as people just have a good time, enjoy themselves, and avoid getting into trouble with, the police and whatever. They're going to have a great time. But just when you're in Japan, watch your step, keep your nose clean. If you're driving, drive safely. If you drink, don't get too mean when you're drunk, and try to avoid the drugs, and you should be fine here. The time's getting a little bit late, and I've got to run to the bus stop, so thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.